Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us. Apologize for our little tardiness. We had some technical difficulties, but I'm so thankful that you're joining us tonight. You are in for a very informative and a very amazing evening with the discussion from wonderful persons who are joining us on this evening. We all know about what's going on in our world as it relates to social injustices and all of the racial and all of the radical things that are happening in our communities. But I feel tonight God is going to allow us to explore many different opportunities in many different ways. So thank you so much for joining me. Let's just get it all out. Our discussion tonight and dialogue is going to form itself around what are some next steps. So we're not only going to deal with some of the immediate problems that we're having, but also try to come up with some next step movements so that we can go forward. We seem to have a window of opportunity right here. I don't know how large and how long this window is going to be present with us, but we seemingly, for the first time in a long time, we have a window of opportunity, and it would behoove us as African American leaders and citizens and whatever that we take an advantage of this that is now given unto us. So our discussion and dialogue this evening is going to form again itself around that kind of a discussion. Thank you so much for joining us. There will also be a time when you can chat with us and send us your comments and your questions, and we'll do our best to get as many of those on and discuss that with you as it is possible. So let me introduce our moderator tonight. I'm so thrilled to have this young woman. We've had a relationship for a number of years, and she is just an extraordinary person in her own right. And that is the Reverend Dr. Jacqueline Thompson. She comes from Oakland, California. Her educational accomplishments started at the University of California at Berkeley. From there, she pursued education and ministry at the Howard University School of Divinity, woo, woo, Howard, where we had an opportunity to do some classes and share together. And from there, she went on to Fuller University Theological Seminary in Pasadena, California. And her educational achievements go on and on. She has been the recipient of many awards. And she is now the senior pastor, the first female senior pastor of the historical Allen Temple Baptist Church right there in Oakland, California. It is she that will moderate and take us further in this discussion and dialogue tonight. Let's hear from Reverend Dr. Jacqueline Thompson.
Thank you so much, co-pastor. It is great to see you. Thank you for having me tonight. And thank you for giving us the opportunity to get it all out. We are so blessed that co-pastor has gathered a very diverse and dynamic group of leaders from all walks of life to help us engage in this critical conversation. And so I'm going to introduce them to you tonight, and then we will get this discussion started. And so we are blessed to have with us tonight none other than Dr. Australia Yvonne Alexander. She is a sociologist and a political theologian. She's the founding president of William Joseph Seymour Foundation and an ordained minister in the Church of God in Cleveland, Tennessee. For 10 years, she served as professor of theology at Regent University in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And formerly, she served as dean of community life at Wesley Theological Seminary. She is a distinguished published author, and one of her works includes Black Fire 100 Years of African American Pentecostalism. She has preached across pulpits and lectured across the United States and the Caribbean, and we are so blessed to have her tonight, so we welcome her. Joining her as well, we have Brother Dion Jones, who is a creative talent, and he uses his digital platform and digital acumen to address key issues of our time. We are blessed to have him with us. He has done associate producing on award-winning documentaries with Drawn Arms. He has served with John Legend and Jesse Williams in their production company. But I think what captured me most is that prior to moving to Los Angeles in 2016, he spent time in Washington, D.C., working with a number of nonprofits with the United States Senate and the Obama White House, where he worked on criminal justice reform. as well as the future of work and Obama's Tech Fire initiative. He serves on the Creative Council at Fair Fight, an organization that was created by Stacey Abrams to end voter suppression and ensure fair elections. So, welcome tonight. We are blessed to have you as well, Brother Dion. Joining us tonight, I believe they called you Dr. Aaliyah Russell. So I want to make sure I honor that for the girls who earned their doctorates. Yes. Works as strategic business consultant in Washington, D.C. Dr. Russell serves as foresight specialist and advisor to program managers and senior leaders in a variety of industries. She employs multidisciplinary methodologies from information technology, education, business to achieve preferred outcomes for her clients. She is a proud daughter and granddaughter of the American South with roots in the Midwest, and she's been married to her perfect gift. Amen. Jerry Russell for 8 years and enjoys spending time outdoors. Welcome, Dr. Russell. We're so glad to have you. We are also blessed to welcome a native Washingtonian born and raised in D.C., Dion Smith, who attended D.C. public schools, graduating from Strayer University with a degree in criminology. Husband, father, grandfather, a Christian and spiritual believer, member of the Metropolitan Police Department for 20 years and advocating for community policing. We are also blessed to have none other than the ambassador herself, Reverend Dr. Ambassador Suzanne Johnson Cook, known as Ambassador Sujay. She is a national and international influencer. She is certainly no stranger. Third generation Black female business owner, expert, diplomat, faith leader, author, mother. I mean, what all can we say? She is the first female and first African American to hold the position of U.S. Ambassador of International Religious Freedom. She is the first and only woman to have served as president of the Hampton Ministers Conference. She has been a trailblazer to so many clergy women, myself included, and brings business experts, brings clergy and faith expertise, brings political expertise. So we are enriched by your presence, and we are still too blessed to be stressed. Last and certainly not least is a friend of mine. We welcome Reverend Thomas Bowen tonight, who serves as Director of the Office of Religious Affairs for Mayor Muriel Bowser. He is also the Earl L. Harrison Minister of Social Justice at Shiloh Baptist Church, where we met so many years ago. And so it is an honor and a privilege to have all of you here tonight to help engage this discussion and to make sure we get it all out. And with that in mind, it's a lot to get out. So Reverend Bowen, let me start with you. Can you share with us, why do you think it's important for this conversation to even be engaged at this moment, at this hour? We don't want to miss the moment, but why is this such an important conversation, particularly for the church?
I'm sorry, I was on mute.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson, and thank you to co-pastor Susie Owens and to Bishop Owens for having this very timely conversation and allowing this platform to engage. Thank you, Ambassador Sujay. I bow in your presence, as we all should whenever we come into greatness. I think it's important because we have to ensure that it is indeed a movement and not a moment. We have to be able to communicate the best that we can, that we are not only guided by our young people speaking truth to power. In fact, that misses the point. As a friend of mine is apt to point out, she says, we are the power speaking truth. This is our moment and this is our time, because the window seems to be closing. And I've been saying to people all week long, get all you can right now before they shut the door, because we can't afford ourselves to lose steam. It's important because this time has come. It did not happen overnight. It did not begin, although it was propelled with Trayvon Martin's death in Florida. This has been something that we've been fighting for a long time. Harriet Tubman started this fight. Mary Church Terrell started this fight. Ida B. Wells started this fight. But now is the time for us to stand up and let our voices be heard. We have to make sure that all that was sacrificed for us prior to was not in vain. And what has surprised me is just how widespread of embrace that this present opportunity has had. That it is truly what Reverend Jesse Jackson dreamed of some years ago with the Rainbow Coalition. That there are people from all walks of life involved, and we have to continue to make the case, as my friend Eddie Glaude says, that until Black lives matter, then all lives won't matter. And we have to close that value gap that says in our country that some lives are more important than others. So I believe that we can't put it off. We can't go the road of gradualism. That we have to continue to stand with our young people, even if some of their tactics are not those that we might engage in, but they are still standing up for that which is right. So this is our time.
Thank you, Reverend Bowen. And you are so right. It is important that we make this not just a moment, but a movement. And so, with that in mind, Brother Deion Jones, he talked about the role of young people. What has been the impact that you've seen as a result of everything that's been going on? And how have you seen young people engaging in this fight and in this conversation? Brother Deion, are you muted? Unmute yourself. All right.
I am.
We
There
want to
we
hear
go.
you.
No, so I think as any movement, young people have been the galvanizers. We have the ability to be on the streets and things of that nature that we obviously learned from what we saw in the civil rights movement, and taking some of the things we learned there and putting them to this movement, as Reverend Bowen said. Like, this has been happening since 2012, particularly when it comes to issues around police reform, and sort of transferring funds into the communities. Myself, I live in Los Angeles, and I had been protesting since 2 days after Mr. Floyd was murdered. By that Friday, I had been arrested that night and had faced violence by the hands of the LAPD. And then that very next day, I got out, or maybe around 3 a.m. That Saturday morning, came home, went to sleep, went to another protest that was organized by my friend, who's the actor Kendrick Sampson, as well as Black Lives Matter LA. And that was one of those protests that we thought actually was going to be a little more sane, where the police sort of wasn't going to act a fool. But that did not happen, and I ended up actually getting shot in the face with a rubber bullet. And the damage that it caused, not only do I currently have a head injury, I'm currently talking to you all with 2 broken bones in my face, but on the back side of my face here, it actually busted open my face. That actually the stitches just got out the week before last. And so we see this moment where what we are protesting is happening to us at the same time. So we're protesting police violence, but as we are peacefully protesting police violence, we are experiencing violence by the hands of police. And so what young people are saying, we are not taking liberation in increments. We are taking it in the capacity, like right now, in totality. And Oakland, we just saw it up there where, young people went for the streets, and now there's, not going to be police anymore in Oakland public schools. And we are actually having these demands and resisting the perform of allyship that's actually making the leaders, particularly our mayors, move the needle when it comes to police reform in our country. So we are galvanizing this movement. We are not, being silent, whether it's on social media or in the streets. We are galvanizing this movement, letting people know what they need to do. So I think it's young people actually driving, and we are thankful that so many people are joining us and have our backs in the process.
Indeed, indeed. And you're absolutely right. The school districts in Oakland did vote to eliminate the police department. And with that in mind, I want to acknowledge the presence of Captain Jerome Merrill, who is also joining us tonight, who works with Metro PD as well. Can you wave your hand so I can see you? Because I want to toss that next ball to you. There have been lots of conversations about the police department, and it is a tender conversation because of those of us who are African American. We have friends and family and loved ones who have served in the police department and at the same time acknowledge the challenges that exist. So thank you for joining us tonight. So we're hearing conversations and requests about defunding the police, and there are a lot of confusion even around the use of the term. So as someone who has built a career and built a life in law enforcement, how would you share with us in this moment? What is it that we need to know and hear to understand to be able to effectively engage?
Good evening. First of all, I just want to say thank you guys for having me. Um, it's the Metropolitan Police Department. We're advanced when it comes to other police departments. Like we've had this training, we've dealt with this for a long time. This is something that we've been very proactive on. So when we see these, it's happening in other departments, and then it affects us. I mean, it's a terrible thing. I think more police officers need to speak up, especially just to let the public know that we do not endorse stuff like that. They're always talking about brothers in blue, but those officers are not our brothers. We're happy to see them go to jail. We're happy to see them in handcuffs. We're happy to see them get fired. So we don't want, there's tens of thousands of police officers in this country. And, a lot of us come in, we work hard every day, and then you have the 5, the 10, the 15, the 20 officers that get all the play on TV because of their ignorance and, their the bad things that they do. And then it just sparks so many flames, and and this country just explodes. And it's only over a handful of officers. And so I think it's important for other officers like us to speak up and let everyone know that we do not condone any of this. And, we want to be a part of the solution. Like I said, we don't, none of this stuff is my own family members look at us look at me like I'm like I'm a bad guy sometimes. So that's not fair either, So, we want to be part of the solution. We want to help, but we just want you guys to know that those 5, 10, 15 officers, they represent such a small percentage of us that, we're happy to see them go away. We're happy to see them get fired. And, like I said, we just want to be part of the solution. That's all.
Well, Captain Merrill, thank you for saying that. And those of you who are in the chat, give Captain Merrill a thumbs up. I'm not sure I've heard too many officers who said those are not my brothers. So I'm snapping up to you, Captain Merrill, tonight. And I'm going to circle
Well,
back to you because there are those who would suggest that it's not just a few bad apples. There are those who are suggesting that perhaps it's the structure, but we'll come back and revisit that. But Brother Dion, you said something that I want to actually engage Ambassador Sujay on. You said that young people today are not accepting justice or change in increments, that you're calling for it all at the same time. But there are those of us, particularly those of us who are clergy and ministry, and that's exactly how we've had the game. We've had the game in increments. So, Ambassador, can you speak to us about having been the first female in so many arenas? We can go down the list, but namely being someone who has had to fight for justice, had to stand for women. We know that you have been in civil situations, that you train organizations as well. So, speak to us about that idea of incremental justice. It was Martin Luther King who said, justice delayed is justice denied. But the reality is, we do not see change overnight. So, speak to us.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me? I want to make sure I'm mute. Am I
I
unmuted?
can hear you loud and clear. Yes.
Wonderful. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for the invitation, Co-Pastor Susie and Bishop, and thank you, Pastor Jackie, for moderating. I was a police chaplain, so I want to speak also to the captain and just salute you and just say continue to do the great work you're doing because our Black officers need our support so much. Speaking to the incremental change does come over time. I think since I'm a boomer, you know, I think it was Gil Scott Heron who said this revolution will not be televised, but the difference now is that this revolution is televised. It was that one
Yes.
young lady holding her on, the oppressor of George Floyd. And so I think, our young people, The difference is that you have technology that we did not have. And so to use that, I believe he's for protest, but I also think that there is some wisdom to sitting at the feet and sitting with and partnering with the Jesse Jacksons and those who were the civil rights leaders that we still have. I mean, John Lewis can certainly give you some lessons about going across the Pettus Bridge. And then those of us who are clergy, we certainly have to do it at the pace and with the audiences that we have, the congregants that we have. And I don't think leadership is going to come just in one way. We came up with civil rights. It was Martin Luther King, it was Jesse Jackson, but this is a generation that's going to have Black Lives Matters, who organize. We're going to have clergy like our 7 age groups. And so it's not going to come any one way. And there is no one way to say that we're going to get freedom. I think we come with many different approaches. For me, not only am I doing a faith-based leadership, but I also believe as a third generation Black woman business owner that one of the ways to freedom is financial freedom. And so for me, entrepreneurship at this stage of life becomes very important. And that's done in increments, but I have the generations who preceded me whose shoulders I stand on, and now there'll be others who will stand on our shoulders. So it can come, but it may not come in the same way that we're used to, and it may not come from just one source. It's going to come from many. When I marched in Washington about the second week for Black Lives Matter, it was the day after the mural had been painted. There were about 7 different sorts of people. There were some on 395, there was some on Main Avenue, there was some near the monument. And then when we got to where the Black Lives Matters mural was, they all converged. Then there were 7 different groups that became one at the Black Lives Matter mural. And I think that's really what we're going to see with leadership now. We have young people, we've got faith leaders, we've got entrepreneurs, we've got police officers who care, and we're going to all converge. And that's where the solutions come from, not from one, but from many.
Absolutely. It is definitely going to take all of us working together. But once again, you provided a perfect segue. Dr. Russell, one of the things that we have also seen that have been unique about this moment is that we've seen corporations commit millions of dollars, whether it's to diversity training or to Black Lives Matter specifically, or for the fight for injustice in their way, shape, or form. And so can you speak to us about the importance or perhaps the role that corporations, Black business owners can play in addressing this fight? Because we do know for some corporations, that is their answer. They want to throw money. But for many of them, they have some systemic justice issues within their own corporation, like bringing on Black folks in corporate positions, but that's a whole nother conversation. So speak to us tonight about the role of business and corporate business and the impact of small Black business owners.
So corporate social responsibility is the idea that businesses are accountable for their actions and that they are supposed to seek beneficial results right along with economic benefits to themselves. A corporate social strategy is actually its social, political, and ethical plan to have activities that achieve its goals but are always mindful of the communities in which they serve. When a group or a component is omitted from a corporate social strategy, it's just as significant as when it's included, because vendors value their customers. They know that it's a symbiotic relationship. When a vendor doesn't recognize your contribution to their economic success, they haven't prepared for your social, your political, or ethical strategies that are going to help that stakeholder group be sustained in their as a part of their market share. So as a small business owner, I know that business leaders will realize their best returns when their hearts align to a transcendent worldview. Thus, I appreciate that we're having this conversation in the context of the church, because we know that Christian leaders will value people and purpose above profits. And it's those leaders who serve after the model of Jesus. Therefore, every decision they make, especially those that they render on behalf of other people, they have to be undergirded by the love of mankind. Now, there are lots of examples where we have people in power who've advocated for their anthropological groups. We see now when it's out of proportion what that feels like. But we've got some great examples in our own communities. You got Lisa Price, who founded Carol's Daughter back in 1993. There's another young man named Tristan Walker. He founded a beauty company in 2013, I believe it was. And both of those people have been able to infiltrate the beauty industry, which for a long time didn't acknowledge the needs of people of color. So L'Oreal and Procter and Gamble now have people on the inside who can deconstruct some of that systemic racism that we might have been identifying for decades. They can go in and give voice to the things that we've been trying to say. And similarly, I'll slip over to athletics and talk about the need for more of us aware of the systemic racism, if you will call it that, in the NCAA system. Athletes, now former athletes, agents, coaches, administrators, and university officials who are speaking up and speaking up on behalf of these students who are being treated in some cases like indentured servants at their institutions as opposed to scholar athletes as they should be. So it's my sincere hope that every business, when given the opportunity, will rely on this concept of corporate social responsibility, and they'll look inwardly to see that they are being good stewards, that they're going to make sure everyone benefits from the firm's actions, especially those people who are the most in need.
Indeed. Thank you, Dr. Russell. And actually, we would do ourselves good as consumers if we actually inquire of some of these businesses and what is their corporate social responsibility policy if they have one, because a lot of the businesses we engage have no policy as it relates to corporate social responsibility. And dealing with the concept that you kind of raised of there are groups and businesses who have not been engaged in this way before, Co-Pastor Susie Owens, we can't just have you sitting on the sofa looking gorgeous and you are brilliant. We have to bring you into this discussion as well, even though you are the host. And so the reality is, the reason why for me this is so significant is because I think there is this myth around Black Pentecostals that Pentecostals don't engage in politics and they don't engage in social issues. But having been Pentecostal all your life, tell me why you wanted to do this and why it was so important for Greater Mount Calvary Holy Church, Mount Calvary Holy Churches of America, to be at the forefront of leading this discussion.
Let me just give a little disclaimer. I wasn't Pentecostal all of my life.
Oh, yeah,
I was
that's
Baptist for the early formation of my Christian journey. I was Baptist. So toot toot for all the Baptists.
true.
And then I did. And then I did go on to grow deeper in my religious commitment and my growth with my Christianity in the Pentecostal persuasion. I think that is a myth about the Pentecostal churches in general. We were not always given the same amount of recognition as other reformations. But it's been a long journey, but we have proven ourselves to be educated, to be socially active in different kinds of situations. You know, there was a myth over the Pentecostal segment that all we did was jump and shout and praise God, and certainly that is a part of our heritage. We're not going to deny that. But we have also been very, very capable in bringing about other social, economic, and reforms. And we have proven that. We have, since early formation of the Pentecostal church, and certainly Dr. Estrella can speak to this as well, we have educated ourselves in both secular and sacred formats. We have been very much engaged in protest and political movements. Many of us have also entered into the field of politics, where we can also bring our views and our particular stance on certain issues. And we can also, we've also become very engaged in humanity. And if we look at Jesus, Jesus was a leader. He was a political leader. He was a religious leader. He was a social leader. And so if we try to follow his example, it's not just Pentecostal, it's what did Jesus do? And how do we, in this day and time and age, how do we engage in the behavior and the conduct that Jesus did? He spoke truth to power. He spoke that those in high power had to become more interested and more amenable to those who were not as fortunate. He spoke to all of the political disadvantage. He helped. He was social. He was very helpful with people. He fed the hungry. He clothed the naked, and those kinds of things. So I think as Pentecostals, we have proven that we are very much engaged in this battle of racial equality and political equity, so that we can at some form say that we're all in this together. So it's not just the Pentecostal thing, it's not just the Baptist thing, it's not just the Methodist thing, it's a everybody thing. And all of us, I think some of the panelists have already stated, all of us are going to have to engage in this. All of us are going to have to help. Businesses, churches, stores, clothing, whatever your particular pedigree is, we're all going to have to engage in this. I think Sujay said it. We're all going to have to engage. It's going to be many different streams that are going to come together and make a platform that our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren will not have to see some of this that we have been dealing with for a number of years. So it is my hope that as we begin this process to look at where we've come from, where we are now, and certainly where is it that we plan to go, that it will be an effort that will be engaged by all of humanity.
Absolutely. See why we needed co-pastor to speak? We couldn't just have her sitting there. And for those of you who don't know, I lived in DC 15 years. And Reverend Bowen, I have to be honest. Not only do I miss DC often, binge Chili Bowl, like I could go down the line of the things I missed, but I really miss DC. When I walked in my house and Anderson Cooper was on CNN, and all I saw was a big Black Lives Matter painting down the street, I said, go ahead, Mayor Muriel Bowser. And so speak to us, speak to those, particularly those who are going to be viewing, who are in DC, around how do we galvanize around what those next steps are. We recognize, as co-pastor pointed out, that we're all coming from different perspectives, but you are unique because you are clergy, but you are also smack dab in the middle of government. And so what is it that we need to know? How do we need to be engaged around that matter? And what is coming next in your eyes for us? Unmute yourself.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I say in this role, I've learned to be bilingual. I have to be able to speak to both God and to Pharaoh. And so it is that one of the things that gives me hope, because as we said it and we can't say it enough, this is more than a moment. This is a movement. What makes a difference, though, is we have the momentum. So grateful that on yesterday, the House of Representatives, um, nearly along party lines, we understand, but they voted to grant statehood to Washington, D.C. for the first time. For the first time, I'm sorry, something happened to my screen. Can you still see me?
I can see you.
Okay. For the first time, legislator moved to grant statehood to D.C., and we know that it still has to make its way to the Senate. But we understand, and I've been told that elections have consequences. I give a backstory to how that portion of 16th Street got painted Black Lives Matter down the street, and that portion also was named Black Lives Matter Plaza. It was genius on the part of Mayor Muriel Bowser. I happened to be at St. John's at Lafayette Square on that day that the president decided to do a sweep in order to walk across for a photo op. I was actually there because they had experienced a fire at their nursery, so I was there twice on that day. I left to get home because of the curfew. The rector left to go to an interview. Absent that, we'd have been out in front of his church when the sweep, and we also would have been the victims of what happened outside of the church. But we gathered with clergy. We tried to back at that church, but was unable to do so. So we had to go down the street to have our prayer with the Episcopal Church and Bishop Marianne Buddy, and also some leaders of the Methodist Church who had come to show their solidarity. And the mayor, knowing that I was going to be there, decided that she would come as well. And when she noticed that we could not be in front of the church, she had determined in her mind that she was going to send a clear message as to the need of independence here in D.C. And that, she says in her article to Washington Post, is what pushed her to go ahead and write Black Lives Matter down the middle of the street. Because in Washington, D.C., peaceful protest is a constitutional right. I, as a member of the clergy, understand that not only is the constitutional right, but we have a moral obligation to protest. But we cannot take away the right of those who want to peacefully protest, and we've always been in a position to protect those who want to do so, up until the point that we experience a destruction of property. But we think that we need to get allied to support the notion that DC needs to become a state. We might as well have a serious conversation that in many instances, one reason why people do not want to give that autonomy to DC is because the majority of folks still are people of color in Washington, D.C. And we should not and we cannot tolerate that.
Thank you so much for sharing. You're absolutely right. I'm not sure if Dr. Alexander has joined us tonight. Dr. Alexander?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Welcome. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. We're glad to have you.
I'm glad to be here.
And I want to actually toss a question to you, an issue that Reverend Bowen raised, because the reality is tonight is entitled, Let's Get It All Out. And so we've kind of had a conversation about one aspect, but let's talk about it all. And so for me, all of it is not just are we dealing with all of the insecurities in our systems that are being raised by this time, but we are still a people in a pandemic, a global health pandemic, that are being adversely impacted in ways that other communities are not. We are still dying at disproportionate rates than some of our other ethnic groups in the nation. And so when you look at us and we have to deal with watching Black men die, watching them call for their mothers, and the repeated video footage that has come forth as a result of that, on top of being sheltered in place now going into our 4th month and seeing the rise in cases. And some of your work has to do with the ideologies that dismantle systems. So can you speak to us a little bit tonight about what's kind of underneath all of that? How do we need to shift our focus and shift our attention, engage our work so that it can be a movement? Because we are a people, quote unquote, that they believe just know how to capture moments.
Well, I'm listening to the conversation. It's a really good conversation. I saw I try to stay off Facebook, but I've been drawn to it. And I saw a post yesterday where a woman Pentecostal leader likened wearing a mask to wearing a burqa, and then she made a racial slur. And I decided not to respond because I didn't have a civil thing to say. But I don't think people take seriously the depth of the impact this coronavirus is having on the Black community. And I say something, this may sound terrible, but this virus is doing more for white supremacists than guns did. All they have to do is sit back and watch us die. And that's why I think we haven't had the supplies that we need. The president's been acting like a fool. And they have decided to leave us to our own devices. And those pastors, those Black pastors that don't have the courage to tell their people to stay home, need to have their clergy license pulled, because our people are dying in record numbers because we don't have the courage to stand up and say, I hear people say we need to be back in our churches. We don't need to go back until it's safe to go back, until our people, many of us are compromised. I'm an older person, but we have underlying health issues. We have all those things that make us vulnerable. We've got, and what the Bible says, am I my brother's keeper? If I'm not going to keep safe for myself, can I keep safe for my brother? Can I wear a mask because somebody else might get infected? Can I stay a certain distance away because somebody else might get infected? It's not about me. It's about what can we do as a people. If the police don't kill us, we can't let this virus kill us. And we've got to take this very seriously.
Thank you so much for contributing. You talking the way I like to talk. Oh, Lord. You got to take some license. that license. Brother Dion, I'm coming back to you because, in addition, racism is not just being exhibited in what we've seen in terms of our interaction with the police, but as Dr. Alexander raised, we see it in the disparity in systems and culture in our healthcare system. But we also got an election coming up in November. And so Ambassador Sujay raised for us the importance and how technology has played a role in a way that it had not in times past. And so with all of your digital acumen, with all of it that you bring, what is your message to us? How can we engage? And first, let me say, God be praised for sparing your life. Thank you for being on here tonight, even though you are
Mhm.
recovering from an incident you've had with the police. That did not go over my head. So it is good to see you. And I am glad that you are well. And clearly you are strong in your spirit and still working. So thank you for that. But now November, how we going to do what needs to be done that I may not be able to say because I'm still Baptist and this
I
month. All right.
No, I appreciate that, and co-pastor and bishop are like a mother and father to me. Co-pastor, even though she's saved and sanctified, can't nobody beat her. So as one of her children, I'm taking that to myself as well. But no, I totally, the most important thing we know is that we have an election coming up in November, and there are still states that also have primaries, right? So that let's not let that go out the window as well. So let me just focus on the action part. Everybody right now can go to vote.org, www.vote.org, and literally do everything you need to do and have all the information you need to know to make sure that you have the ability to cast your ballot, because it allows you to do 5 things. One, you can check your registration. If you're not registered to vote, the second thing it will allow you to do is register to vote. The third thing it will allow you to do is help you find your polling place. And then the fourth thing will allow you to do is, knowing that we are in a pandemic, not knowing how long we're going to be in this pandemic, a lot of people, just may not feel safe going out voting in person. So how do we vote by mail? We know that it varies by state where the capacity of how to request an absentee ballot when it's due, all these other things. But it allows you to also register to request an absentee ballot by directing you to your state site to be able to do that. So everybody literally right now can text somebody and say, hey, are you registered to vote? They say yes. Do you know your polling place? Are you going to vote by mail? Everybody right now can text somebody that. And if they are not registered to vote, or even if they do not know, hey, maybe I just want you to check and make sure, go to vote.org. Everybody can do that. It's easy, it's safe, and it's the best way that we know that our voice is going to be heard. If there are any issues in that, there is a number you can call. So if I haven't received my absentee ballot, it says, I know I registered, but it says it can't find me on the Secretary of State's office, because we know that a lot of Secretary of States are doing a lot of things that are not kosher to make sure, particularly people who look like us, that our votes are being counted. So there is a number you can call. That number is 1-833-336-8683. 1-833-336-8683. That is a national voter hotline. It's staffed 24/7, and it will make sure that you have everything you need to protect your vote and to make sure your vote is counted. What we are seeing is that Trump is energizing us to actually go to the polls and make sure that he is elected out. That is at a national level. But we also have to see what's happening at the local levels, particularly when it comes to police reform. It is mayors who put up the city budget and present the city budget. It's city councils who advise on the city council members who advise on city budgets. It's mayors who have the capacity to hire and fire police chiefs. It's DAs, as we see in the Elijah McClain case that has resurfaced a year later, or the Breonna Taylor case. It's DAs who have the capacity to prosecute. Here in LA, our DA has not prosecuted any police officer who's killed an LA citizen in 8 years, and over 600 police killings have happened in the city of LA during her tenure. She has refused to prosecute any of them. So we look at all these issues that require us to make sure that we have the knowledge, but also that we are okay when it's time for us to cast our vote at vote.org. And the last thing that I'll say is that we see that there's this influx of folks knowing that we want to vote because we also want the Senate to restore the section of the Voting Rights Act where a lot of these states have the capacity to change these laws without our knowledge, without any input. So in states across the country, we've seen places shrink, particularly in Black communities. In Kentucky, we saw 600,000 people put to one polling place. And in addition to that, we're also seeing this push for new leadership in the city of New York and in upstate New York. We saw 4 long-term incumbent Democrats who have been in office over 23 and 30 years. And this is to my point of not, accepting incremental change. All of them were beaten out by 4 young folks under the age of 45, who were Black, diverse, and more inclusive than what we had seen before in Congress. And so we are knowing that everybody is, I think, galvanized around this voting issue. If you look at Georgia, nearly 200,000 more people voted in their primary this year than 2016. People are ready and anxious to vote. The issue that we're up against is actually not people wanting to vote, but the folks who are trying to block us from voting.
Thank you so much, Dan. So if you all heard that, you can go to vote.org, check your registration status. He's given a number, 1-833-336-8683. If you need to check your status, National Voter Hotline. Also, to make sure that not only you, but someone close to you is registered to vote. Captain Merrill, I have to come back to you because the issue keeps coming up around police reform. And so we know that Minnesota City Council, the Minneapolis City Council voted to dismantle their police department. And they are looking at different forms of policing. And we keep hearing this term community policing. And there may be those who are viewing or listening to us who don't know what that means. So can you explain to those of us who may not be clear on what does it mean to have community policing? Because at the end of the day, I know at least in Oakland, there are folks who want to know if something happens, what does that mean for safety? Who am I going to call? And so they don't recognize that there are alternative forms.
Yeah, thank you. Just to speak quickly about Minneapolis and the other departments that they're trying to break down and maybe restructure. Those departments have had issues for a while. I'm not even going to criticize them. Some of those departments probably do need to be broken down and reformed in a more proper way. But community policing, especially here in the District of Columbia, I think community policing started pretty much here in DC. We've been on community policing for years, since Charles Ramsey first came in 2001. That's been an issue that we've been concentrating and focusing on. So we have a lot of contacts in the community. People, like I'm at the 5th District. I have community activists. I have people that live in the community, citizens, ANC commissioners, county council members. All of them contact me. All of them know me. And they all know that, we're deep in the community. Like we're out there every week in the community. We just did the Juneteenth march. Every week we're doing stuff. And community policing is very important. I think that's one of the most important parts that we have in the police department, because it has to be trust between the citizens and police. It doesn't work if there is no trust. But you have to have a strong police force, and you have to have a strong citizen force that is able to engage the police department and who's able to, if there's reforms needed, able to get those reforms enacted. So you need both to be strong. You need both the police department to be strong, and you need the citizens to be strong as well. And if you have both of those, things work out much better, because when things like this do happen, we put so many deposits into the community. Sometimes we might have to take a little bit out, and then the community can step up and say, hey, no, these police officers have been doing this for years. They've been helping us. They've been here. It's not everybody. It's just these few. So, the community policing is about putting deposits into the community as well. Just letting them know that we're here for them. Like it takes both of us to do everything together. And, community policing, like I said, it's probably the most important part of a police department.
Yeah.
Thank you, Captain. Thank you, Captain. Ambassador,
Yeah.
you mentioned you were a former police chaplain. And so
Mm-hmm.
we know that I believe it's the House, Reverend Bowen, connect me if I'm wrong, that put together a bill trying to establish some national standards for policing. And without telling on myself completely, it is a challenge because I remember Rodney King so vividly. I
Mm.
remember looking at that video and feeling there's no way that those officers won't be convicted. We all saw it. We
Mm.
all saw it. And yet
Yeah.
I also remember where I was and what I was doing when the verdict came back from Simi Valley and literally LA burned. And so around the idea of national standards for policing and wanting the discussion to be about next steps, share with us what you think from an almost an insider and a clergy perspective point of view, having dealt with officers and know the issues that many of them struggle with. What could be some next steps, and are national standards the answer?
Well, I just want to also speak to what Captain said, and thank you for sharing that. I was hired in 1990 under Commissioner Lee P. Brown, who had just come from Atlanta with the child killings. And he actually was the one who started community policing in New York. It's the largest police force, but it's the safest, large city in the world. And so I just want to ditto in terms of how important community policing is. But I also was there during the Amadou Diallo killing, which was our Rodney
Mm,
King, and so I'm friends with his mother who lives in the DMV. And so I had to be a bridge. I was on the inside, and there were people like, Reverend Sharpton and Earl Graves. I mean, massive celebrities from the Black community marching on the outside. And we had a conversation because some of us needed to be at that table on the inside because there were Black
mm,
officers who are systemically, messed over because of racism. And I could have an open door to the police commissioner. So again, to my point of that, we're going to come from many different ways for Reformation and for Renaissance, but some people have to be at the table because we're at the table because people marched. And so we want to
yes,
make sure that we can go to the offices, the doors that have been opened for us, and that all are important. Their voices cannot stop, the protesters cannot stop, but people at the table cannot stop being present either. Otherwise, what happens to the Black police officer who comes in my office? He's been injured just like the white police officer, but he gets less of his pay than the white officer. So who do they come to? They come to the Black chaplain. So I think we have to make
yeah,
sure that we're at the table and that we stay at the table. So that's number one. Number two, I wanted to give a shout out to Mayor Muriel because now our mayor in New York City is letting the Black Lives Matter mural be painted right in front of where Trump's building is, where he actually lives when he comes to New York. So I'm saying kudos. It happened just yesterday. So I'm just giving her a shout out. And my third thing is that, again, there are different many ways to approach it. And I believe that entrepreneurially, now is my with a faith-based approach, we have just formed what's called the first global Black women's chamber of commerce, and it's the first chamber of commerce for commerce and for intergenerational wealth, because we also have had disparities in our finances and our access to capital. So we're inviting all Black women who own businesses and those who want to. We have a launch initiative where we're going to create 25 Black women business owners in the next 2 months. And so we've partnered with a white corporation that has PPE equipment. And they said, what can we do to help? Well, you can help close the wealth gap. And so I think as we
yes,
look towards going forward, let's look at ways that we can say, when they ask us, how can we help? I don't need a shoulder for you to cry on. I need you to help close some wealth gaps. I need you to help close some of these racist gaps, places where systemic racism exists, even all the way up to my ambassadorship within the State Department. And we had a Black president. The systemic racism was there. So if we can make a difference, and we must, then let's have the action steps in place. When they ask us, have an answer. This is how you can help us. globalblackwomencc.org. And I'll be glad to help any sister get on their feet and get out of, instead of having to have your hand out for the check, have your hand to write the check so that our people really can be free.
Indeed, indeed, for addressing the wealth gap. Co-pastor, I'm yielding to you because I recognize that you also wanted this to be engaging with those who are viewing. And so there may be callers that are on the line or comments or questions that have come in. So I want to make sure that I'm acknowledging those. So if there are any callers who have questions, you all let me know how to feel that, and we'll be happy to do that as well as lift up those that may have come in the comments.
Okay, the production team is going to do that, and I certainly agree with all of what has been said. There are many different tributaries that's going to lead to our freedom. It's not just one bunch or one group. And I said to my grandsons, I have grandsons 25, 26, and then I have little ones as young as 6. And I was saying to my older grandsons and my middle grandsons, I am fighting now the same battle I fought when I was a teenager. I'm a
My
baby
goodness.
boomer. I'm dating myself. But
My
I worked on voter registration. I come from Boston, Massachusetts. I worked on voter registration. I worked with the Freedom Riders and those kinds of things. So for me, sometimes, is this deja vu? Wait, what, what have we done? What have we accomplished? It seems as if we're right back where we started. So we're going to have to come up with ways, and I agree with Dr. Sujay, technology is going to help us because we didn't have the global or the media's outlets that we have now to make this global, to make this universal, to let people see this is not us just talking. These
Right.
kinds of actions and behavior and conduct from people that we have put in office, from people who are patrolling our streets, from people who should be more sensitive to people of color, this is what we've been trying to say. So it's going to take all of us. It's going to take our economics. It's going to take our educational system. And I think that the police departments need to be, and this is me, so power to the people, this is me, police officers have to be trained like everybody
yes.
else has to be trained. You just can't walk just because you love children. You just can't walk in and say, I want to teach children. There is a training process. There's a practical side to this. So these police departments need to train their officers how to
Yeah.
get along with humanity. Not
Yes.
just black people, how to get along with people. You can't give somebody a gun and a badge who has no idea what it means to be a human being. Let me just stop right there. You cannot do that. And so there are going to be many, many tributaries to fall into this ocean that is eventually going to lead to better freedom, better equality, better economics for all people. I don't even want to get to the Native Americans. God bless them.
Right.
Yes, yes.
You are absolutely right. And not just training. So I dare say, I had occasion to meet with one of our local police chiefs, and one of the things that he raised is not only did their city not have training, but when they did kind of deal with that psychological pre-exam, there was nothing that looked for implicit bias.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's a one and done situation. So when you come on in the same way, the clergy person that I was when I entered, Howard University 20 years ago is not the clergy person I am today. The officer that you are when you come in bright eyed and bushy tailed when you're young is not the officer you are 20, 30 years later. So at some
Right.
point, there has to be a way to check in and see, what has changed. How are you doing? Do you still need
Right.
to be on the street, or do you need to be behind a desk? And Dr. Alexander, with that, again, because I keep coming back to this ideology and this theology that kind of undergirds what it is that we're seeing. And co-pastor raised the idea of deja vu. Is it deja vu as someone who's kind of been in this struggle and fight for so long, or is it a matter of every generation has its own battle that it must fight?
Well, it is deja vu because when Martin Luther King was killed in '68, we watched the cities burn, and many of us were in those riots. And even though we're clergy today, I grew up in the church. I've been a Christian most of my life, but I was there, and we thought things were going to change drastically. And I heard somebody say it's incremental, but we have come to a point. The media, somebody said it very careful. Well, we saw things days after it happened. We watched, everybody in this country could watch as George Floyd had his life taken from him. It has changed the whole paradigm. And we're not willing to wait another 50 years before Black people are free. And I think and one thing that we cannot let happen though, there cannot be a generational split. Young people and old people, we need to work together. I can't march anymore. I'm too old to walk, long distances, but I can support the young people who march. I can write. My writing is what I hope will give people hope that they can read that and they can go and run with that and do what they have to do. We've got to work together. I have great grandchildren. I don't want to see my great grandchildren in the same place 50 years from now. My grandmother didn't expect it for us to be here where we are today. We have seen some advances, but racism is deep-seated and embedded and a part of the fabric of this country, and we have to work together with our white brothers I'm working with people of every race. Those people who want to see justice, we've got to work together. This has got to stop. Enough is enough.
Enough is enough.
Cannot stay here for another few years.
And there are just two things that I wanted to be clear about. One is that I do a lot of the folks on the ground, we do see this as a multi-generational movement, right? So we know that we have the ability to be on the streets, but we also know that, our elders who can't come out with us, and, obviously because of COVID, we are also being responsible and saying, hey, you can't come out, Mom, you can't come out, Auntie, but hey, can you call and email the state of Colorado and make sure that Elijah McClain's case is being investigated? Can you call the state of Kentucky and the DA in Kentucky and make sure that and plead that Breonna's killers? So there's these multi-latitudes, and there was this conversation around corporate America. There are so many Black leaders in corporations who are calling us, and we're being able to tell them, hey, this should be the language. This is what people should be saying, and they are fighting in that fight. So we see this as in the Ella Baker model. Is that, again, there is not this one leader, as Dr. Cook said, there is not this one leader we're looking at, but there are leaders in multi sort of facets, and everybody has a role to play. And so what we are able to do is, be able to provide knowledge on what that role can be, and also be able to listen and say, hey, I have the capacity to give $1 million to folks on the ground. Where should this money be going? So we know that. The second thing I want to be clear about is what defund the police means. And so when we say defund the police, we are talking about imagination of public safety. And so what we see is that what police have been put in society to do now, obviously, police is a sort of a descendant of slave catching. Police have been put in the society to respond to mental illness, to respond to homelessness issues, and to respond to nonviolent issues, which we know they don't have the capacity to do. And what we've seen time and time again, because of cell phones and videotapes and body cameras and all these and audio, we see that there's this response with violence. The largest mental health care institution in our country are our jails and prisons. And so when we say defund, we're talking about a reimagination of what public safety looks like. So that means divesting from overly inflated police budgets. So in LA, we have a $10 billion budget. $3 billion of those dollars are allocated to the police departments. So we're saying, what does it look like to divest from that and invest in our communities? As Dr. Susie said, we know that our communities are more safer, not when there are police there, but when there are good investments in healthcare, good investments in education, good investments in entrepreneurs, small businesses and jobs, shout out to the local affiliates of the National Urban League, and good investments in park and recreation. And so instead of Elijah McClain having a police officer called on him, instead of Mr. Gardner in New York having a police officer called on him, what did it look like to have a caseworker, a mental health professional, an unarmed skilled professional, interventionists, gang interventionists, etc. So we are not saying, this whole we're not advocating for this whole lawlessness. We're saying a reimagining of what this looks like, and how our mayors are actually funding these police departments. And it's the boots on the ground. We don't believe that salvation is coming from our elected leaders. Salvation is coming from the folks on the ground, and we're holding them accountable. As we saw in even DC, we are resisting performative allyship, where we love the Black Lives Matter on the street. However, we also have to hold the mayor accountable and council accountable for how much they are willing to fund a police department, and particularly here in LA, a violent police department, versus what they want to put in the communities. And so when we say defund, we're talking about a reimagining of public safety, more so than anything, and not this whole idea of lawlessness.
So
thank you, Dan, for that clarity. And I just want to make sure you mentioned, I'm sorry, Ambassador, but we have some callers. So they told me Annette Brown is closing, and so we don't want people to miss out on these area experts. So we want to make sure those of you who are watching, call in, call in, call in. I promise you we will get to you. So Annette Brown.
Hello. Yes. My question is for the captain, and I just want to thank him so much for taking a stand. And based on the fact that a lot of the problems we're having with the blue shirt versus the white shirt in the police department, what would you suggest us doing in order to make it maybe a rookie policeman feeling more comfortable to report misconduct of maybe a higher ranking police officer? Thank you.
Well, it's not. We do train the officers. If they do see something, then they have to report it. I do understand what people say, about the camaraderie with police officers. It is pretty easy to make an accusation against one of your higher superiors. That's not the issue. That's not the hard part about making the complaint. I think the police department, just like other professions, the people that are in that profession, there's sometimes a silent thing between those people in that profession that they just understand. But I just think that, I don't want people to misinterpret that that's a bad thing, as far as, if an officer has an issue with his superior, he should be able to make that complaint, and that complaint will be heard. Like in our department, if they make that complaint and a number is assigned to that complaint, and the complaint has to go through, like, that number keeps track of that complaint. So that complaint can't get lost. It has to get resolved in order for that number to be put into a different category. So with those number tracking system that we have for our complaints, it's very difficult for complaints to get lost, and they are taken very seriously. So, it's not like there is a barrier between an officer making an accusation against their superior. I think it might be more of a cultural issue that we have to deal with. And that's what managers, and I think that's something that has to be dealt with in the academy. That has to be taught from the very beginning, as far as reporting stuff, or, understanding that, in the police culture, sometimes, you're not doing the best thing by being quiet about your brother or your sister. That's not necessarily being the best thing, especially against those that are brutal, those that we don't want to be a part of the police family. So I think that's something that's more of a culture. That's not a structural issue thing, because a complaint can be filed. I think it's just more of a cultural thing that supervisors have to deal with. And like I said, it has to be done with most likely from the academy level.
Thank you, Annette Brown, and thank you, Captain Merrill, for answering. Is there another caller? Ambassador, I think I cut you off while you were making a statement, so my apologies. You were saying?
Okay, I think the caller just came.
My name is Hazel Thomas, and what I'd like to know is, co-pastor said there were many tributaries that lead into one ocean. And I'd like to know, how can the youthful activism be translated into political act?
April, repeat your question one more time. You said it's for co-pastor, and you wanted to know, she said there were many
tributaries, she said.
Tributaries. And how can that be translated into activism?
Is
That was
that
her
the
question.
question? Okay.
Yes,
Yes.
Co.
Yes, yes. Great question. In other words, there are many ways we're going to come to some solutions. And as we look at the ways to come, we know voting is one. We know economics and as it deals with the businesses and that's one. We also know teaching and education is one. We also know respecting human life is one. We also know reforms and reformations are one. We also know that the church plays a part in galvanizing humanity and teaching us to approach it from a place of love and forgiveness. And so all of them coming together. So I think for individuals, you have to find what your passion is so you can develop your purpose. So once you find if your passion is working for political and getting votes out, then that's the tributary. That's the path you take. So I think it's finding out what that passion is, what that purpose is, and then formulating that into some action. So what may be my passion as we come together to bring some reforms, to reinvest, to reconcile, to restore some things, and then to release some things, then you work toward that. So we're not all going to work in the same posture or position, but we all need to work. We all need to work. And so that's what I mean, that there are many ways to approach this.
Speaking of which, Dr. Russell, I just wanted to ask, while those of you call in, put your questions in the comments. There are those who are monitoring so we can make sure we get your questions. Co-pastor is saying that there are many, many areas, many ways that we can contribute, but the reality is there are a lot of people who are listening and who are viewing today, and they get up, they go to work every day, or they get up and go to the dining room, let me say that, and go to work every day if they're sheltered in place. And so if you are working on a position, been with a company 10, 15 years, how can you contribute? How can you as an employee contribute to the fight in a way where you are working on your job and still have a passion to see justice?
I think that's a great question. First, I want to appreciate the analogy that co-pastor gave about tributaries, because the very image of tributaries feeding into a river is very apropos. There have been tributaries of privilege for generations, and that has led to institutionalized demographic entitlement. So in order to dismantle it, we have to use a theory that I learned in English literature, and I just apply it everywhere I go. Excuse me, everywhere I go. And it's called deconstructionism. Co-pastor said and some others before her, you have to activate where you are, and it doesn't mean that your fight is any less powerful if you do it in a different way. I appreciate the books that Dr. Alexander writes. They inform some of my thinking. I attributed many quotes to her when I was coming through graduate school. And so it requires all of us to have a voice wherever we have, as it was stated, the passion to be there. I like to look at this from an economic perspective, and it's important to me that we all have equal access to resources. So I can appreciate how Ambassador Cook is working with large corporations now to help small women-owned businesses get going in light of this pandemic. Those are the kind of times when we have to be ready to operate. Everyone's talking about making this a movement and not a moment, but the only way that happens is if we are ready. So I look at lessons from the past. My family they were part of the Great Migration from the South Tennessee, Mississippi area up north to Milwaukee. And they were able to open a couple of businesses in the 60s. When I look back on it, I'm amazed because my grandfather stopped going to school when he was 7, 8 years old because he had to work the fields. And yet when he and his wife made it to Milwaukee, he worked in a factory part-time or full-time, excuse me. And then he worked in a restaurant part-time with his wife as they opened it, got it going, and they were able to have great success. Now, they were able to buy equipment. They had access to the things they needed, even buying commercial property. But I can't help but think that they were somehow limited by segregationist policies at the time as to where they could open their business, so on and so forth. I look forward to people like Robert Smith, one of the phenomenal folks that are doing good work right now as a venture capitalist. He used his acumen as an entrepreneur to convince politicians to go back and look at the funding bill for this COVID-19 response, where loans were made available to small disadvantaged businesses, and lots of it didn't make it to our community. So he worked with them to help make sure that the next round of funding would actually make it to our friends in our communities who are barbershop owners, beauty salon owners. And that was important to help all of us make a step forward. He sits in a boardroom that many of us will never have access to. And so I'm appreciative that he, in his place, was able to do his thing. The best thing my family did for me, beyond modeling Christian business leadership, was they gave me access to education. It was in my Catholic high school that I first heard the question, can you legislate morality? And then in another class, I heard, how much is enough? And those were principles and conversations that have followed me even to today. So I think it's going to be incumbent upon universities, especially HBCUs like Howard University, capstone of academia for HBCUs, a level 1 research university. They present a unique opportunity to advance disciplines because it matters who's telling the story. If we don't have our voices written on the page, then we have to respond to what someone else has said about us. I attended Howard at a time when the Ebonics debate was up. I enjoyed listening to the debate amongst my professors about this vote that was going to take place about making Ebonics an actual language. It strengthened me as a person to hear diversity of thought and develop critical thinking. So I think as parents, as community leaders, as village members, we have to keep reminding kids that it's important to be ready, because when your time comes, when your opportunity hits, you have trained and ready to sit in that seat. No one's going to wait after we're done moaning and complaining and everyone listens and gives us a tissue. And the then what has to be, I'm ready. And so for those of us who are ready, we will be calling people like Dr. Cook and saying, hey, I'm ready. I've got a small business and I would like to grow it with the opportunities that you were able to network and connect. So that's what I'm looking forward to. I think we just being ready is the moment of the day. I would like to hear all of us have a passion and a purpose that we're all working towards that allows us to step in when that moment arrives and someone says, I can help you get a little bit further in that business or in that entertainment industry, whatever it is. So I'm looking forward to those opportunities.
Thank you, Dr. Russell. We have another caller on the line. I believe it is pronounced Kartika. I want to make sure I've said that right. So, Kartika, if you're on the line, thank you so much for joining us live. What's your question this evening?
I wanted to know, this question is being posed to the captain. In the situation where George Floyd was concerned, how is we as citizens would be able to circumvent that aspect, that situation? Should we have called the police on the police? How could we have got a quicker reaction instead of just everyone standing around? But how can we be more powerful as citizens to stop a situation like that? Shall we meet it, if we meet it? Thank you.
Yes, and I understand. At that time, you can always dial 911 and talk to the dispatcher and tell the dispatcher you want a supervisor to come out, or you can advise the dispatcher what you're seeing. That video was about as powerful as it gets, and I know your question was, what could we have done to prevented that? How could we have got those officers off of him? The quickest thing would have been probably just to call 911 and have a dispatcher send out a supervisor, or just like I said, let the dispatcher know what's going on. So that dispatcher will go over that air with whatever's going on from that citizen. And so that desperation or that urgency can be relayed to us. But that'll probably be the only way. Something like that situation, there's just no words for it. I mean, he knew that there was a camera in his face. I want to say that something like that, you just look at it as a unique situation, but that was just an awful situation. Next time, they should just call 911 and report it to a supervisor immediately.
Pastor Jackie.
Thank you for that question. Yes.
I wanted to ask co-pastor a question, because you have assembled this evening not only a great conversation, but you have an intergenerational, intergender, interdisciplinary group of people here. And many times people of faith are invited to the table, but we're already at a table of faith. And I was just wondering if from tonight you might want to host faith leader roundtables around the issue of race that go beyond this audience, and that we would be glad to work with you, because I think it's so important. The people you have represented here, government, out of government, age range, gender, I think it's an important place to start to have a faith-based discussion on race, which has really never happened. And I would just salute you and work with you if you felt the passion to take this further.
And I would like to second that. I'd like to second that. I think one thing that we need to do, people don't know how to talk about race. And so when you broach the question, we've got to develop materials to help people see what racism really is. A lot of people think I'm not a racist because they've never done anything overtly, but I have been dealing over the last couple of weeks with a lot of people of various races, and I've heard some things that people don't really even realize what racism is, and we've got to help them. We have to have conversations. I think what you said is so important. The conversation has to continue. We cannot let this moment die. We've been here before, as I said, where we've gotten excited, something has happened, and we get really excited. But now, from this moment on, we have to move forward. And I think your leading the conversation would be wonderful.
We all agree, co-pastor, and Dr. Alexander, you're right, because there are those who believe what we are hearing is the tremendous silence from many of our white counterparts that are also in faith and who are clergy. And a lot of it is because they believe, oh, well, I like Black people. I like co-pastor. You preach my conference. They don't understand that when we have conversations about race, that what we are talking about are systems and structures that have been designed, that when the Constitution was written, they were not talking about you. When the laws were designed, they were not talking about you. That's why it has amendments, because you were 3/5 of a person. And so I think it's an excellent idea. We all agree. And so what we need seed. What do we need to do? We need to cash out somebody to get started.
It's not enough just not to be racist. We have to teach folks to be anti-racist.
To be anti-racist. Right. I hear you being anti-racist.
Right.
That's what I was going to share, because even Kendi, who's now leaving American University, I believe going to Boston University, that's just his book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. That is not enough to say I'm not racist. I've never, but are you an advocate for that line?
Right.
Because you know that when racism was an investment in this country, people invested in racism. And because people are saying it was not me, well, the dividends off of racism are higher today than ever before. So people are benefiting from the investment in racism now at a higher level.
Yes, you are right, Reverend Bowman. And we have one caller. We have another caller. I have to get him on. Okay. And once you find out who it is, you'll know why. And so welcome tonight to the conversation. Our very own presiding prelate, Bishop Alfred Owens, is on the line. And we love you, Bishop. We thank God for you and for being with us tonight. And so we yield however you'd like to share, whatever you'd like to add.
Just say hello.
Hi.
We love you, Bishop.
Hello.
Hi, Bishop. We hear you. You're on the line. We love you.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much. Look, I am glad. I'm glad that you cannot see me because I'm on quarantine. Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes.
Good. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just glad to be online. I said I'm glad that you can't see me because I'm really on quarantine. But Co-Pastor Susie did not invite me to be a part of this. However, she did tell me I could watch you. So can you imagine me being in one part of the house and she's in the living room, and I just want to butt in and just bust into the screen, but I have to live with her, when this is over. I didn't know what time it was going to end, but I wanted to commend her, as Dr. Sujay did, for having such a wonderful, expansive panel and such a mixture of the millennials. I have a relationship with everybody who's on this Zoom, and I just love all of you. Dion was a part of our church for years and went on to American University. Aaliyah literally helped me raise my grandchildren. That's Mrs. Russell. Dr. Estrella Alexander, we've been on work together. I'm coming back to her. And of course, the police officer there must know how God used us to help clean up the 5th District, especially on the Rhode Island Avenue corridor. Dr. Sujay was the first person to invite my wife and I to the Hampton University Ministers Conference when she became president. Jackie Thompson is most definitely out there, and she's truly Baptist Coastal. And I don't think I know the young man from Shiloh who's working so closely with the mayor, but I'm sure he knows me. I just wanted to congratulate has been absolutely amazing. I've listened to everyone and every word. I don't know if Dr. Estrella was on when Jackie Thompson tried to throw us out or throw us on to speak to the Pentecostal situation, although she is definitely Pentecostal. And if any of the members of Allen are watching or listening, that's a Baptist Coastal daughter right there, Miss Jackie Thompson. But I agree with Dr. Alexander, because racism is so real everywhere. And I think another panel like this and hitting some of the other issues, in particular to the Pentecostal church, there was racism and challenge between the two founders of the Pentecostal movement. And William Seymour had the audacity, being an uneducated black man, to step out from the racist attitude of Charles Parham. And now he is indeed the father, the black father and founder of Pentecostalism. So that racism has always existed, it's always been real, and now it's right up into our faces. And I think a diverse panel, as we've heard today, brings it all out to the forefront. And I want to echo what Dr. Sujay said. Co-pastor, you need to do this again. It's been wonderful, absolutely great. And as your husband, I just wanted to applaud you for a job well done. Although I'm in another part of the house, a job well done. Thank you all.
Thank you, Bishop.
We love you, and we are always honored and blessed whenever we hear from you. And you know, as presiding prelate, you are honorary member of everything that takes place. So thank you for that contribution. And co-pastor, I echo everything that has been shared tonight. This has been a tremendously rich conversation. I feel honored and blessed to have been a part. And so I'm not sure where we are on time, but I certainly want to yield to you for any closing remarks. But just recapping what you have heard. You have heard go to vote.org. to make sure that you are registered to vote. You have been given a phone number so that if there are challenges, you can deal with challenges around voting. You have heard support DC statehood. I had a taxation without representation license when I lived in DC that drove around. And so that's taking place. So you want to make sure you support that. You have heard that if you know of any women, any African-American, are they strictly African-American women, Dr. Sujay, or any woman? African-American women.
Black women.
African-American women. If you have a desire, you feel a call, a passion, you are being led to start a business, then you have an opportunity. Ambassador Sujay has said that they are trying to make 25 new business owners. And that is one of the ways we can fight against racism, about closing that economic wealth gap. We have heard from Dr. Russell that we need to be prepared and ready so when doors are open, we can step through the doors, and the responsibility that business owners and that educational institutions have. We have heard from Dr. Alexander that we need to be dismantling changing the very fabric of some of these systems and structures because they are racist in their genesis. We have heard from Captain Merrill that there are good officers, that there are officers who are willing and who understand the challenges that we have in police departments, and there's a need for police reform. We have heard Dion say that we can use our digital platforms. We've been so blessed because we even got seniors in our church that saying, now, how do I get on the book of faces? How do I look at the screen? They are trying their best to engage. And so if you have a senior in their life, make a page for them. Teach them how to do it because they want to be engaged. And we have certainly heard from Reverend Thomas Bowen about all of the great things that are happening in DC, but we owe all of this conversation to our visionary and to our host tonight, Co-Pastor Susie C. Owens. So please feel free to close us out in any way you decide.
Thank you so much. I certainly appreciate all of you. Let's give a good knuckle to Dr. Jacqueline Thompson. You've done an excellent job in just bringing this all together and certainly giving us some food for thought as we end our discussion and conversation tonight. I will take on and look deeply into bringing some faith leaders together. Dr. Samuel Chan talks about systems and structures. Systems, yes. What you put together, structures, how you expect what you've put together to work. And so we can pivot off of that, and we will see. We'll try to see what we can do by getting together some faith leaders and then of many different races, many different denominations. Yes. Because at the end of the day, out of one blood, God made all of humanity. Yes. So when it's all said and done, the earth is the Lord's, the fullness thereof, and they that dwell therein. And we have to find ways to come together and live in peace and harmony. And that's what this is all about. So thank you.
God bless you.
We'll get back in touch with each of you. Have a pleasant weekend. And the Lord be with all of you. We're praying for you.
And also with you.
That you heal.
And also with you.
That you heal very well.
Yes.
So thank you
Love
so
you,
much.
Co-Pastor.
Have a good weekend. Love all
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye. Jackie, let's talk.
Indeed. We will.